Hello, Ancients and Antichrists. My name is Tibius Guy, and there's a new trailer out for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I have a lot of opinions about it, and I refuse to shut up about them, so we're doing a trailer reaction video. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll edit in some other footage on top of it also to illustrate some points while I'm talking, but I have so many opinions, and I'm very excited, so let's just do this.
So, what did you want to talk about?
So first of all, massive spoilers for like the whole plot of the original Final Fantasy VII. So if you want to be unspoiled about this 20-year-old game, then yeah, sorry, that's going to be happening. Anyway, this is the pivotal emotional scene between Cloud and Tifa, which is it's a time in their youth where Cloud has decided to leave his hometown, go to Midgar, become a soldier for the Shinra company, like Sephiroth. Oh, it's going to be my dream and my fancy plan. And first of all, beautifully recreated, like the original, very low resolution 3D rendering of this particular scene, but something they preserved the colors really beautifully. They've preserved the visual design of Nibelheim and the water tower and everything excellently. So just massive props to the artists at Square Enix for managing to preserve so much of a game aesthetic that was created in 1997, which has held up in my opinion, but which still, the temptation to modernize must have been strong.
When spring comes, I'm leaving town. I'm going to Midgar. I'm going to be a soldier. The best of the best, like Sephiroth.
Okay, so this scene is an incredibly important scene in Final Fantasy VII, and it's easy to miss that because it comes up when Cloud has done the first job with Avalanche, like the first introductory mission where they bomb a reactor, and he's like, okay, I've gotten my pay, I'm gonna leave now because I'm a cool mercenary who doesn't care about anything. And then Tifa's like, hey, hang on, when we were kids though, you made a promise to me that if I was ever in trouble, you'd come and save me. Like, she reminds him of that shared emotional connection, and that's what spurs him into taking on the second job for Avalanche. Later on down the line, though, this scene becomes incredibly important because it's a shared memory between the two of them that proves that Cloud is a real person, which, if you played Final Fantasy VII, you will know a big part of the plot, especially the arc for Cloud himself, is Sephiroth keeps seeding doubt in Cloud's mind about who he is, about whether or not he's even a real person. Sephiroth tries to convince Cloud that he's nothing more than a failed clone of Sephiroth, and all of his memories are fake, and that he's not a real person. And there's some truth to that because Cloud is operating for most of the game under an assumed identity. Like, he's taken on this identity of like the cool, strong, successful soldier mercenary guy who doesn't care about anything, like, which he has basically adopted wholesale from Zack, his soldier mentor, basically, who died for him. And that's a response to trauma. Anyway, Cloud's whole thing in Final Fantasy VII is a long and terrifying existential crisis. This shared memory between him and Tifa, though, is the one thing that Sephiroth cannot ultimately make the both of them doubt. Like, this is an incredibly important emotional moment for the two of them. And it's in the game, which I knew they were gonna put it in the game, but what I'm wondering is how much of that will be preserved into the remake. Like, that's the thing that both excites me and terrifies me about the remake is I remember Final Fantasy VII, and Cloud especially, for the very raw and rather frightening existential crisis he goes through in the game, where the one thing that pulls him back from the brink is the fact that he has someone who fully believes in him, like, who believes that he is a real person and that he's worth saving, which is very important. How much is that going to translate into Final Fantasy VII Remake? I don't know, because they're changing a lot of things around, as we shall see. Hello, Jenova. And hello, Sephiroth.
Tell me, is it really you?
It's not really him, but one thing that's important to remember about the original Final Fantasy VII is that Sephiroth never shows up in Midgar. He never shows up. There's never a scene with Sephiroth in Midgar in the original Final Fantasy VII. What happens in Midgar is that Sephiroth is mentioned in passing by President Shinra and by a few characters, like sort of talking, oh yeah, Sephiroth, yeah, great soldier, vanished a long time ago, wonder what happened to him. But he's never really brought up as a character. The entirety of the Midgar arc And this is one of the brilliant things about the way that Final Fantasy VII is designed, is that you start in Midgar, you're fighting against the Shinra company. President Shinra is set up to be the big bad villain of the whole piece. Like, he's the guy who taunts you, who's like, oh yes, I'm the president of the company, and I shall destroy you all, you filthy rebels, blah, 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 blah. And then you come to the crescendo of that particular story arc when Cloud, Tifa, and Barret assault Shinra HQ in order to save Aerith. And they get all the way to the top, and they get captured, thrown in the prison cell, and then they wake up after having slept for a bit and find that all of their prison guards are dead and their cell doors are open, and Jenova, the research specimen that we saw briefly a second ago, who we will see again, has vanished from her tank, and they follow the stairs up to President Shinra's office and find him murdered with Sephiroth's sword stuck through him. And that's it. That's the only appearance, as it were, of Sephiroth in the Midgar storyline. But he doesn't show up physically. He's never a character. He's never a person. The brilliant part about how Final Fantasy VII is designed is that you start out with this small, manageable story: Avalanche versus Shinra, and you're fighting basically for like the fate of the world through the proxy of Midgar, the city, where you're bombing the reactors, and Shinra is doing evil capitalist stuff and dropping the plate on half of the city and stuff like that. And then, by the time you reach President Shinra, you're like, yeah, no, we're going to have our confrontation with President Shinra. We're going to beat the bad guy, and then all the evil stuff is going to stop because President Shinra has been removed. Let's get that control bar out of there. And this expectation is subverted. All of a sudden, there's a bigger villain than just this small-minded, petty capitalist asshole. He gets just murked off screen by someone you don't even get to see. And then you have to flee from Midgar. You exit Midgar, and all of a sudden you're on this massive, expansive world map. The whole world opens up before you, because now, rather than dealing with a small, petty tyrant of a single city, you're dealing with a global threat, the threat of Sephiroth. And from there, you go to the city of, to the little village called Kham, where Cloud has his flashback explaining who Sephiroth is, how Cloud is connected to him, the whole thing that went down in Nibelheim, Sephiroth's ambitions about being an ancient and taking over the world, and yada, yada, yada. But that doesn't happen until after you leave Midgar. So here in the remake, as Square have already shown us, they have very clearly decided that we're not going to bother with that. Sephiroth is going to show up pronto. He's going to be there. You're going to see him. The enmity, like the relationship between him and Cloud, is going to be clarified immediately. And like the purist in me is screaming like, no, you can't do that. The perfectly arranged story structure of the original game is being corrupted. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, but like that reveal in the original Final Fantasy VII that President Shinra is not the main villain of the piece, that reveal only works because if you're playing that game for the first time, you're not expecting Sephiroth to show up. You're not expecting the subversion. But it's 20 years later, and literally everybody who knows anything whatsoever about Final Fantasy VII knows that that pretty anime man is the real villain of the piece. Everyone knows that Sephiroth is the real bad guy. He's the iconic bad guy. So that reveal doesn't work anymore. You can't pull the bait and switch anymore, because everyone's going to be playing the first part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake thinking, okay, but when is Sephiroth going to show up? Like, it's been blown. The surprise doesn't work anymore. So the decision seems to have been made to shuffle the structure around a little bit and have Sephiroth be introduced as a villain at a much earlier stage. And, like, again, the purist in me is like, no, you can't do that. You have to have the slow buildup of the whole thing. Like, throughout you chase him to Junon, and then you chase him to over Costa del Sol and to the Gold Saucer. And, like, because in the original game, chasing down Sephiroth is your motivation for traveling from place to place to place, like all over the world. And the more you chase Sephiroth down, the more you begin to learn about him. And the more you begin to learn about Cloud, that his personality doesn't quite make sense. And that like there's some holes in his memory that are weird. And like these little seeds of doubt slowly begin to bloom. They're starting that off much, much earlier here. And to an extent, that's probably sensible. Like, it's... Again, the reveal has been blown. We already know all these things. So the only thing that's left to do is to change things up, to mess with the story structure and say, okay, but we can still pull some surprises on you. We can still make you think. And it was this that that made me want to talk about this so much. Like, there's also a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to gush over. But it's this thing that I think exemplifies the ethos that Square is approaching this remake with, that has me both excited and worried. Because, like I said, the structure of the original, of chasing Sephiroth across the world, and Cloud's obsession with catching up to Sephiroth, eventually morphing into, oh, wait, he was infected with Jenova cells, and he was trying to complete the reunion the whole time, which is the culmination of Cloud's initial set of story arcs at the end of, is it the end of Disc 1 or Disc 2, something along those lines, when he goes to the Northern Crater and it essentially gives in to his identity crisis. Like, that whole thing, that's out the window now. Like, I don't think they can do that anymore. They're gonna have to try and do something else, and what it looks like to me from this scene, let's let it play out.
Are we on schedule?
Please, Mr. President, I am asking you to reconsider.
So that's Reeve. He's the guy who pilots Kate Sith, who I assume is not going to be showing up in this version, in this initial version of the remake, because in the original game, you don't meet him until the Gold Saucer, where he inserts himself into your group as a spy. But here, he's being introduced a lot earlier, directly as a, like, anti-villain, as it were, like a member of the evil team.
Director to us.
A member of the evil team who's trying to push back against the worst excesses of President Shinra's cruelty and Heidegger's mockery.
Stench of the director's cowardice fills the room yet again.
Also, by the way, how the hell did they not give Heidegger a German accent? His name is Heidegger. Oh well, anyway. Another change.
Mako supersaturation confirmed.
Engaging materia cooling to reduce temperature.
This is Scarlet. She doesn't really have a personality in the original game very much. Like, she's just basically like, she's just like evil corporate bitch lady. And like, she's just evil and she goes, and has people killed and she's mean, but she doesn't have much of a personality. There really isn't much to her. The only notable scene she really has in the story as such is, well, she burns down Barrett's hometown. That sucks a lot. But the most notable scene she has is a slap fight with Tifa on top of a giant cannon, which is a whole pack of Freudian imagery that I really hope they leave out of the remake. Like, if they're gonna have any kind of a fight, make it be like a punch fight where she's piloting a mech and Tifa's kicking that mech to pieces. Anyway, slight change of personality in this game. They have dialed her up to 11, and she's now
Name director?
Shinra Queen, the Shinra Queen of Femdom. Which, yeah, you know what? If you're gonna go with a hammy, like, corporate supervillain character, why not make her just like a massive femdom who likes to step on people? Sure, why not? Like, I support that. Live your kinks. It's 2020. We can do that nowadays. That's yeah.
Meeting shortly.
I don't know that she's got much more of a personality. Like, rather than Scarlet in the original, who's just kind of loud and shrill and really fucking annoying all the time, here she's much more calm, composed, and much more sexually charged.
Stop. Your timing is impeccably atrocious.
Oh dear.
Then we have Palmer, who seems to be pretty much himself, mostly, except in the original game, Palmer is a cartoon character. Well, he's still a cartoon character, just look at him. But in the original game, Palmer is like this excitable man who bounces up and down and speaks very childishly. Like, oh, space program, when will the space program get funding? Woohoo! Here, they've taken a very different tact with him. Here, he's much more, it seems to be, at least in this very short scene we see of him, constructed as a bit of a hedonist, someone who very much likes butter in his tea, which is a thing that I didn't know people did that, and now that I know that people do that, I would prefer not to know that people do that. Why would you put butter in tea? Anyway, that's probably insensitive of me.
Oh dear, a man of my refined taste running out of butter.
I do like the facial animation on him. Like, there's some good expressions there. Anyway, okay. The Honeybee Inn. So, in the original game, this is a brothel. That may not be the case anymore. Like, I'm getting more of like a burlesque vibe from the way that the Honeybee Inn is being presented here, which probably, all things considered, a better way to go. In terms of because the Honeybee Inn, like, is one of the dated parts of the original game. It's like, yeah, it's a brothel, and also some really uncomfortable, like, stereotypes in there. They seem to have changed that out for the better.
Honeybee Inn, Cloud. True
And then
beauty
there's
is an expression of the heart, a thing without shame, to which notions of gender don't apply.
So this is going a lot harder on a sort of, like I said, it feels much more like a burlesque than a brothel in this instance, which, you know, is probably going to be a more comfortable direction to take things in. But more specifically, the Honeybee Inn now, apparently also, is where Cloud gets his outfit for when he goes and tries to get information out of a pimp in the slums by pretending to be a lady who wants to sleep with him, which is a whole thing. What I do like here is that there seems to be some intimations towards taking some steps in the direction of modernizing the whole cross-dressing sequence in the original game a little bit by having a character explicitly deliver a monologue that says, hey, there's nothing wrong with cross-dressing. People can dress however the hell they want. Beauty doesn't have any gender. That's nice. He also seems to be a complete gay stereotype, like just the gayest stereotype. Like, look how he enters the scene.
Welcome to the
Like,
Honeybee Inn.
Yeah. They're not being subtle about it, are they?
Beauty is an expression of the heart.
And that's the thing that worries me a little bit. Is like the dialogue suggests that maybe they're gonna be a little bit more tasteful with it this time around. Like it's been 20 years. We've had some changes in the way that we deal with these subjects in society. But then on the other hand, it's also like I can see that they're still very fond of the stereotype, and that's got something to do with cultural differences between Japan and the West as well that I'm not really qualified to speak on. But, like, if you remember in the original, there were some, like, really just some unfortunate gay/queer male stereotyping going on in that whole quest line, specifically the bits in the gym and some optional things that can happen in the Honeybee Inn if you do specific things and things go terribly wrong. So, like, I'm so nervous about this because I would very much like it for there to be, like, a massive AAA, hugely celebrated JRPG where a character cross-dresses and it deals with it in like a mature way.
Without shame, to which notions of
and I do like the
gender
look, like
don't apply.
Cloud is rocking that dress.
Perfection.
And I do like that Cloud doesn't seem to be uncomfortable with it. Like, he's like, oh, well, this is happening right now. But he's not like, oh god, there's a man too close to me, ew. Which is nice that he's like,
Not a word.
stoic about it.
No!
But you're so pretty.
He feels a bit embarrassed about it because, like, he's a cis dude and he's dressing up in ladies' clothing. But it's like, it feels a little bit better. And then there's Don Corneo. Oh, boy. Yeah, Don Corneo, the very explicit pimp. Oh, boy. So Don Corneo in the original is, he's unchanged. He's very much the same as he always has been. He's a complete sleazebag who basically every single day brings in 3 girls from the slums and decides to sleep with one of them and gives the other 2 to his subordinates to use as they please, which is like, and he has like a sex torture dungeon. And what I'm saying here is that if this is not handled with some care, everything about this is gonna be super uncomfortable.
It's right to be is.
Today's.
But what I do like is that they immediately establish that every single person in the room thinks that he's a pathetic, disgusting loser, who's just like horrible, and everyone hates him. Which, yeah, good. By the way, interesting that Cloud is wearing a black dress in this version, because in the original he's wearing a purple dress, which might just be to keep his color scheme, because he wears like purple pants also in the game, and that might just be a visual cohesion thing. But I can't help but think maybe, because in the original game, there's a whole little mini game thing happening leading up to Don Corneo, where if you pick the right dress, cologne, and lingerie, he will choose to attempt to sleep with Cloud, which is a whole nother slightly uncomfortable scene. And I wonder if there's going to be a similar mechanic here where, like, you can get multiple different outfits for Cloud depending on some choices you make in stuff that leads up to the thing. Maybe. I don't know. That would be fun, but that might explain why he's wearing a black dress instead of a purple one.
Huh? Which one of you?
And I do like that Cloud isn't like he's still relatively androgynous. Like, it's not that he loses all of his masculinity from being. But I like the androgyny of the design that he's got here.
On you.
Well,
Oh boy, speaking of character designs, here comes Captain Mullet. Okay.
aren't we having a wonderful time kicking the hornet's nest?
You know what I want. A second dance. Just the 2 of us.
By the way, this guy's new. I don't even know his name, actually. He seems to be a soldier based on his uniform, which is very similar to what Cloud is wearing. And he has just the mulliest mullet I have ever seen in my entire goddamn life. Like,
So what?
like, my God, he looks like he just jumped fully formed out of a Bon Jovi video, doesn't he? Holy shit. And he rides in on a motorcycle and is like, hey, Cloud, oh, let's rub our swords together, man. Like, he has an obvious massive man crush on Cloud, which I think is going to be absolutely hilarious, and the fanfics are going to be completely amazing. But he's a completely new character. I have no idea what he's there for. And I think what he's supposed to be is a kind of recurring rival character, mid-boss, who can show up multiple times. You kick his ass, he comes back a little bit stronger over and over again, which is fine, but that's sort of what Reno and the Turks, that's the role that they were supposed to play. That's the role that they play in the original game. Reno and the Turks are this like recurring enemy that show up over and over again, and the more that you fight them and the more you interact with them, you kind of build a relationship with them as well, because they don't really hate you. They're just doing their job, which is to serve Shinra and occasionally get in your way. This guy seems to be sort of taking that role, at least within the first, like, this first part of the remake, which is going to be God knows how many games. And I'm like, okay, but then what's Reno and the Turks going to be doing in the I wonder about that.
Just the two of us.
Still, again, like I said, they're changing the structure of the game, because you can't pull the reveal anymore. Like, Sephiroth is too big of a villain to hold back. You have to make some changes, you have to come up with some surprises, and that seems to be what they're doing, and generally speaking, I support that.
So what the hell is it?
A fascinating question.
Oh, did it just talk?
I am that which you see before you. Nothing more.
Say hello to Ret13, also known as Nanaki. I really, really like what they've done with his character design in this version of him, for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it looks a lot better than in the original game. But secondly, because Nanaki's story is that, as you learn when you go to Cosmo Canyon, he's a child. Of, like, relative to the lifespan of his species, he's like a 16-year-old, 17-year-old. He's a kid, but he talks in a very deliberately adult manner. He carries himself in a very deliberately adult, oh yes, I'm an adult, I'm in control of things, manner. And the reason why he does that is because, well, his parents died when he was a child, and he's been trying desperately to cope with that loss by taking on their responsibilities. And he has a very complicated relationship with his father, and, like, he idolizes his mother. Like, there's a whole bunch of like, teenage angst stuff going on inside him, and the way that he tries to cope with it is by pretending really, really hard to be an adult. And this character design does an excellent job of serving that idea, because he looks like he's 450 years old. Look at that shaggy mess of a thing, right? So once you get to Cosmo Canyon, and his grandpa, Bugenhagen, is like, oh, well, he's actually been a child this whole time. It's going to be, first of all, way more heartbreaking, and second of all, so much funnier. So I'm in favor of that, which leads me on to my other concern, which is that the whole Cosmo Canyon thing, is that even going to be in the remake? Like, because it took this long to get the Midgar portion of the game done, right? Now they have, like, the entire rest of the world still to go. The more I think about the scope of Final Fantasy VII as a game back in 1997, like because it was just a bunch of clay puppets basically, like, gallivanting across pre-rendered 2D backgrounds, Square Enix were able to create a huge diversity of environments and storylines because, well, those storylines only had to be text boxes that pop up on screen. They didn't have to be fully animated and voice acted. They didn't have to have high-fidelity environments created with lighting maps and God knows what else for every single new environment that they wanted to create. Like, the production costs and the production burden of AAA gaming, especially on the level that Squaresoft is aiming for with this remake, has changed substantially, and for that reason, I worry about all of the weird stuff, like all of the weird little side bits, especially Junon with all the little hotels and rooms that you can walk into with a bunch of side characters like Johnny or the Shinra executive who, like, show up occasionally over the course of the story, and you sort of get to know them a little bit, and you see their stories play out sort of concurrent to your own. If you go and find them, they're completely optional content. Lots of players never meet them or see them. All of that stuff, I just feel like for me, that's such a big part of the charm of Final Fantasy VII. A big part of, for me, of the charm of Final Fantasy VII is finding out that, oh, hey, Nanaki was a kid the whole time. And that becomes important later because in the Northern Crater, like, as you progress past Cosmo Canyon, Nanaki begins to behave more like a child. Like, he begins to be more open about his feelings and his fears and his insecurities, and he begins to behave more childlike if you pay attention to him. To the way that he talks, to the way that he reacts to certain situations, especially if you give him the black materia, and then he's the one who gets tricked by Sephiroth into bringing it back. Like, there's so much stuff there that you can kind of do on like a relatively limited budget when you're making the original Final Fantasy VII in 1997, but which will demand literal millions of dollars to realize in the modern times. And I can't help but wonder, like, how much of that is going to get cut out. Like, I imagine they'll still have Vincent Valentine in there and Yuffie, but how will their stories play out? They were largely optional in the original game. So much of the original game was completely optional. Like, the amount of shit you miss when you play through that game for the first time is astonishing to me from a modern AAA perspective. Because modern AAA games don't want you to miss out on, like, 80% of like, their content, which is what happens in Final Fantasy VII, the original. That's what made it special. There was so much to discover that you would never necessarily get to see. And yeah, I wonder about that. That's the whole thing I wanted to say about Nanaki. There's more trailer, though. Hey, do you think Cloud has some anger issues about Sephiroth? I don't know. I can't really tell from the way that they're interacting. If, like, I feel like Cloud is handling this in a very emotionally mature way. By the way, notice just a little detail that I noticed. Notice that Cloud has 2 materia in his Buster Sword at the hilt, the 2 little green orbs there. There's another shot where he only has 1 materia in his Buster Sword, which tells me that if you only have 1 materia in your Buster Sword, only one of them is going to show up on the character model when you're walking around. And that's the kind of little detail that will make me so very happy, for no good reason except that it's there. Anyway, like I said, because you can't hold the reveal of Sephiroth as the big bad villain, instead, you have to dive deep. You have to go into this nonsense, like, immediately. You have to immediately get this show on the road.
Touching reunion.
Which is what they seem to be doing, because initially, Cloud isn't, like, screaming with anger at Sephiroth, like, ah, Sephiroth! Ah! Like, that's not really his initial reaction to realizing Sephiroth is back. His initial reaction to realizing Sephiroth is back is like, I need to find him. I need to settle the score. Like, is to try and be cool about it. You're clearly not doing that this time.
Very, very good. And thus is the hypothesis proven correct. I can only hope you will...
This is just me, but is it just me, or does Hojo look vaguely like Hironobu Sakaguchi?
Continue not to disappoint.
Like, is that just me? Is that just the angle or something? Anyway, that's the Airbuster.
I'm tired of playing tag anyway.
That's the Airbuster, which is an enemy that you normally fight as a boss in the Shinra headquarters. Here, they are below the plate, somewhere in the slums by the look of it, which means this is probably the fight that leads up to the dropping of the plate on Sector 7. And this guy is showing up as what seems to be either a boss or a mini-boss, which is interesting, again, like they're shifting stuff around.
Come on!
But I love that they still keep the original character design for this thing, because like so much of Final Fantasy VII's original enemy designs were created specifically within like the very strict limitations of what can you get away with on a PS1 in the very early stages of that console generation, which means there's a lot of basic shapes. There's a lot of like, you can kind of see it in the Heligunner here. Let's see if we can get, like, you can kind of see how he's put together from relatively basic shapes. Like his body is a wedge, and then there's a bunch of like bulges that make up for the rotor blades, and then he has these guns that are mostly made out of circles. You can kind of see that in a lot of the enemy design in Final Fantasy VII. And something that really excited me about this trailer is that they've kept so much of it close to the original.
Come on!
Avalanche ain't Buta or anybody, fucker!
Yeah, that's Leviathan. Leviathan is an optional reward for a very late game side quest for Yuffie. Like, that's Yuffie's specific side quest in Wutai. Pretty damn late in the game, honestly, is where you are supposed to get the materia for Leviathan because he's the patron saint and protector of Wutai. But Barrett, in this particular cutscene, when you're fighting the Airbuster, is it called the Heligunner or the Airbuster? I can't remember. When you're fighting that guy, mentions that Avalanche isn't Wutai or anyone's puppet, which tells me that they're also introducing the concept of Wutai way earlier in the game. Again, Wutai as a place in the world of Final Fantasy VII isn't really something you're properly introduced to until you leave Midgar. It's basically a foreign country that Shinra once went to war with, and then completely destroyed them, and then basically colonized the shit out of them. And so they've lost their pride as a nation. Their resources are being exploited outside of their power, typical colonialism. And that's why that's Yuffie's whole motivation for stealing materia and running around the world and trying to trick people into giving her materia is because she wants to try and restore the national pride of Wutai. So, again, this is telling me that they're shifting that around to show up way, way earlier in the story. Like, Wutai and the whole situation between Shinra and Wutai and that country as an acting force in the story of Final Fantasy VII is going to be introduced way earlier and probably seems to be given a lot more weight here.
We're here to rescue Aerith, remember? We don't need more attention than what we're gonna get.
So, this is the climb up the Shinra Tower. In the original game, you have the choice of either breaking into the Shinra Tower with force, and that means you get some extra fights early on, but it doesn't really change much else, or you can run up like 120 flights of stairs and get some hilarious dialogue with poor Barrett and Tifa as they're trying to run up this endless cycle of repeating stairs. It seems like if that choice isn't there in the remake, then it seems like stealth is going to be your only option going in. But again, it's the sweepers. Look at that character design. Look at that. Again, look at these big-ass, clunky, weirdo-looking robots. And again, you can see the influence of that PS1 era aesthetic. Like, this is how you design a robot enemy when you only have, like, 15 polygons to work with. And I'm so happy that they've kept it intact. I'm also really happy that they've kept the silly bits intact. This is the Choco Mug summon, which, again, you're not supposed to get until you leave Midgar, but fuck that, I guess. And look how this is executed. It's still a big cartoon. I'm so happy about that because it's the first summon materia that you can get in the original game, and it's a very silly summoning animation. You also have a small percentage chance of summoning the fat chocobo instead, which sits on your enemies, which is also quite funny. But it's a very silly summon. It's a very silly animation, and I'm glad that they've kept that cartoony silliness with the big cloud of like smoke where everybody's fighting inside it. That's just a nice thing. Like, that's the kind of thing that makes me feel hopeful about the remake, that it's going to keep the whimsy and the weirdness and the silliness of the original. But then on the other hand, like, there's other stuff where I'm like, oh, but how are they even going to include that on anything like a reasonable production budget?
I know these people, and I know they're never gonna let Aerith go.
I just love this.
She's the last living ancient on the planet.
Fucking kick their asses, Tifa. That right there, that is, again, you can see, again, the PS1 era character design, but I'm so fucking happy that they've kept these guys. They're called the something police, as the enemy is called the something police in the original translation, which was kind of terrible. But they're these biologically engineered weapon creatures that Hojo has been mixing up in his lab. But I'm just so happy that this weirdo, creep out, fucked up alien design is still in there. Like, because the thing I was so afraid of with Final Fantasy VII was that they were going to anime the shit out of everything. Like, everything was just going to be super cool and anime looking at all, like, all the sweepers, instead of being these big, clunky, almost steampunk looking robots with massive grills on the front, were going to be turned into these slick, cool, mecha looking anime robots that are like shoot lasers and stuff. No, they are big and clunky and ugly and stupid looking, and I love it.
I know these people, and I know they're never gonna let Aerith go. She's the last living ancient on the planet.
And these guys are back also, which I just and even their animations are similar to the way that they were in the original, which I love.
This is
The source of everything. Jenova.
So, you have one encounter with Jenova in Midgar in the original game, and that is you see her body being stored at Shinra headquarters in Hojo's lab while peeking through a window, and you realize, oh, hey, she's missing a head, actually. It's just her torso that's stored there. And the torso then breaks free, takes on the shape of Sephiroth, and kills President Shinra, and then goes off to join the reunion with all the rest of the bits of Jenova that are converging on Sephiroth from all over the world. You don't have a fight with her, though. You don't meet Jenova until after you have had the flashback in Calm, where Cloud tells the story about how he and Sephiroth confronted each other in the Nibelheim reactor, and so on. And then you have the first proper boss fight with her on the transport ship from Junon to Costa del Sol. Again, they're changing this stuff up. There's clearly a boss fight with Jenova much earlier. I have to assume this is like in Hojo's lab underneath Shinra headquarters, because Aerith, Tifa, and Cloud are all there. So I wonder about that. And some substantial parts of her design have been changed. And again, that was probably necessary because the original Jenova design is kind of like it only really works in a really low fidelity PS1 era rendering. And any updated rendering kind of has to zero in on her as like a physiological body horror monster of science, kind of cancer on the world character design, because that's what she is in the original Final Fantasy VII. Is she's a cancer on the planet that's killing the planet, and that's what you have to ultimately destroy. But what gets me, oh god, Tifa looks so good.
Suck on this!
That was buried limit right there. Again, that's an original Final Fantasy VII enemy design. It seems to have been turned into sort of it looks almost like a mini-boss here. But look at that. What's it called? I can't remember. It's an enemy that you're fighting Shinra headquarters, and it likes to slap you in the face with its big, fat, ugly tail. But again, it's this ridiculous PS1 era enemy character design that I just find so gorgeous. Like, it's so lovely that they've actually gone through the effort of keeping that clunky aesthetic completely intact instead of animating the shit out of it. I'm so happy about that.
The Shinra Electric Power Company isn't the real enemy. I promise you, there's a much bigger threat. I just want to do everything in my power to help.
So those voice lines from Aerith, again, were a thing where the purist inside me was like, no, you can't do that, because in the original game, Aerith starts the game out as a spunky street kid who doesn't take crap from anybody, and like who definitely fucks, like holy shit, and who mostly kicks Cloud's ass in conversation, which is why Cloud is so attracted to her, is that she's a very strong personality, which complements him well because he's a very weak personality. Ultimately, as the game goes on, you find out about that. And over the course of the game, as Aerith becomes more and more conscious of the legacy of her people, like that she's an ancient, and that she has this connection to the planet, and that she has this responsibility to use her powers to try and counteract what Sephiroth is going to do, and this whole legacy of the ancients comes bearing down on her, she slowly transforms in her personality away from like the wise talking street kid who gave Cloud a hard time in Midgar into the sort of more angelic, maternal older sister, perhaps, like savior of the planet that she ultimately turns out to be. In this game, again, they seem to have accelerated the timeline. Aerith is conscious of a larger threat to the planet from the get-go. She understands from the get-go that Shinra isn't the source of the problem. Jenova is the source of the problem. She's the thing that has to be taken out. And so she seems to be, and that's something they've teased already, that Aerith sees these dark spirits swirling around the world. I have to take it that that's like the life stream reacting against what the Mako reactors are doing, or something along those lines. Like, she has this heightened spiritual awareness that nobody else has. And she has already decided that she wants to like take up the responsibility of helping the planet and saving the planet. And again, you have blown the reveal already, so you might as well lean into it. They're trying to surprise us by changing up exactly how this story plays out. But on the other hand, if Aerith doesn't get to be like that wise talking street kid who's like too quick to run into trouble and like a little bit too overconfident and has maybe seen a little bit more than a woman her age should have seen. I mean, because I was always annoyed that in all media after Final Fantasy VII, Aerith is only that maternal, spiritual, sort of Christ-like savior figure. She's always I am the Mother Mary, and I shall save the world with my spiritual ancient powers. Like, she's always that sort of slightly removed, sexless character, and I really hope we get early game Aerith in there still. Like, we still get to see her be silly and ridiculous, and take the piss out of Cloud, and have little flirty verbal dialogues with him. Like, I hope that's still in there. Because I just don't like the whole angelic savior, white mage, RPG stereotype character, because that's what Aerith wasn't at the start of Final Fantasy VII. She morphed into it, but when she became that character, she had a very strong motivation to do so. It was absolutely necessary. In fact, she was the only way to save the goddamn planet was for her to do a Christ-like self-sacrifice, because that's how her consciousness could enter the life stream, and only with her consciousness in the life stream was she able to cast Holy, which is the only spell that can counter Meteor, which gives Cloud and the rest of the gang time enough to find Sephiroth and destroy him. Like, that's her master plan. She saves the world by leaning into that responsibility. She has a reason to do it. She isn't just born angelic and perfect and like already knowing all the spiritually good things that need to be done. She has to come into that role. She has to have a character arc. I want that for the remake as well. Please, for the love of God, don't make her an angelic savior right from the get-go. Please.
All of you. And the planet.
Anyway, that was 43 minutes about like a 3-minute trailer, because that's my fucking brand. I have so many opinions about the remake. Holy shit, it hasn't come out yet. I've seen like maybe a collected 10 minutes of gameplay from the goddamn thing, and you would not believe how many more opinions I have that I want to throw into your ear holes right the fuck now, but we're gonna have to limit it to this. I am currently playing Final Fantasy VII as a Let's Play over on my second channel. I have gotten quite a lot further in the game than the remake is going to go in the story. And if you're interested in more analysis of Final Fantasy VII, oh boy, believe me, I'm having opinions over there as well, along with gameplay from the original, so that you can actually watch it and compare. And I think I'm going to edit some of the footage off that on over the top of this reaction video to illustrate some of the points that I'm making. Anyway, I want this game. I want it so bad. I want to stress that none of all of this rambling I've been doing is me saying, "Oh, this is bad. I don't want it. This is not my Final Fantasy VII." Like, it's not complaining. It's concern. Like, I have concern that certain aspects of the original that I liked are being lost, but I'm also optimistic that they're trying something new. Like, they're actually trying to expand on what this game was, and there's something new to explore, and I love the dedication they have to keeping so much of the original alive, even while I'm worried about which things that they're deciding to change. I want this game. I want it. I want it so bad, and the moment it's out, yeah, you bet your ass we're gonna stream it. I'm gonna talk about it in exactly this manner and tone of voice the whole time. Anyway, if you have enjoyed me rambling on, quite frankly. In fact, let me just... there we go. More appropriate music. If you've enjoyed this incessant rambling about Final Fantasy VII and the remake and my many, truly so many thoughts about its relationship to its original cousin, then you can hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons down below, because they make numbers go up, and numbers going up is the only goddamn thing that YouTube cares about. If you haven't enjoyed this long-winded ramble about a 3-minute trailer, well, I can't say I blame you. This is 45 minutes long. I don't know what happened. I've lost all control of my life. And if you want to help me get therapy for that, I have a Patreon, and I have a tip jar. You can access both of those down in the description. There's also a merchandise store if you are so inclined, and I'd be very grateful for the help. And as I say at the end of my videos, even if you don't want to support me directly with money and stuff, that's completely okay. I don't mind that. But I will encourage you to, generally speaking, support the content creators whose work you enjoy directly with anything you can spare anytime that you can, because for online content creators, especially smaller ones, that $1 donation can quite literally be the same as thousands of views on a video. Like, those small donations matter so much more than you think, especially to smaller creators who don't have a huge audience to back them up. So if there is an online content creator whose work you enjoy, please consider supporting them directly with anything you can spare whenever you are able to spare it. Okay. Am I done? Have I pitched everything now? Yes, go subscribe to my second channel. I suppose I should say that as well. I'm playing Final Fantasy VII and Kingdom Hearts 3 over there, so... God, I need to go to bed.